his computer. There we go. All yours, Mike.
All right. My name is Mike. I'm alcoholic. It is good to be here with you guys. Thanks for the invitation. My home group's the Full Measures group. We meet in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a couple nights a week. Uh, do a big book discussion group on one night, and we have a speaker meeting on another night. If you're ever in town, look us up. We'd love to visit with you. My sobriety date's October 4th, 1992. I'm enjoying this meeting. It's a lot of good energy, and I can tell you guys are centered in the integrity of our message in the big book. Um, I'm an alcoholic as described in the book. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time in that. I think I'd like to get in the weeds with a little bit of other stuff, like, because we can spend a lot of time in AA, but not a lot of time developing a relationship with God. I think that's pretty common. A lot of us, and I even for years, I think I spent time doing that too. I got to know a lot about God, but really lacked a direct experience with that power. And um, I think part of that for me is I was still too locked up in the story of my life. And I know the book says that our stories are, the greatest possession we have. With it, we can avert death and misery for others. Uh, that's true. I believe that. But when it becomes our identity, then it can be a real hindrance to having what we would call a relationship with God. Uh, what we might call experiencing God in the present moment. If I'm tied into the story of who I think I am, I'm still in bondage of the condition that step 3 says I can be relieved of. Um, so I got my book open in front of me. I usually don't when I do this stuff, but I just feel like I want to hit on a few things in chapter 4 in We Agnostics and just share some experience with that stuff. I was brought up on a work and family farm about 25 miles northwest of where I sit right now in Cedar Rapids. Good people. Um, my mom's side, they were a devout Catholic bunch. My dad's side, they never went to church. There was diversity there. But I was brought up right, straight arrow stuff. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, respect your elders, say yes sir, yes ma'am, do your chores, go to church, all the stuff. That's how I was brought up. And in our book, when it gets into We Agnostics, they talk about this mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life. If that were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. And that's true. This really helped me see, I think, really clearly what I want to talk about in some of this stuff is like the second part of the first step with unmanageability. So I didn't know what that really meant for a long time in AA. I thought my life was unmanageable because I drank. And then for a time in AA, I thought I was managing it, which is just playing God, really. Still locked up in the narrative of the ego mind, developing a spiritualized ego, if you will. Um, so those codes, those philosophies for life that I was brought up with, that I knew were right, didn't save me. I could wish those things with all my might. And this started at about 10 or 12 years old for me. I'm starting to violate these these principles that I know are right, I'm already starting to violate them, and I'm already starting to get that look that we get from people. But I lack power, man. Our book is spot on page 45. My human resources, as marshaled by my will, are insufficient. They will fail me utterly. So clearly, lack of power is my dilemma. I have to find a power by which I can live, obviously, but where in the heck is a guy like me going to find that power? I denounced God at 7.5 years old. I'm not a foxhole prayer guy. I never said a prayer from 7.5 years old until I got 12 stepped into Alcoholics Anonymous about, I don't know, 16, 17 years later. I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe it would work. I kind of thought there was something out there, but I didn't think it could really work in our lives. And that was based on an experience I had. So our founders were very clear on how a guy like me is going to get connected with this power. Where and how am I going to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable me, an agnostic guy, to find a power greater than myself that is going to solve my problem. Now, at first glance, I still think my problem was drinking. If I can get over drinking, it'll be all right. And then the problem kind of shape shifts a little bit. I get this idea that it's selfishness and self-centeredness, and that looks like what it looks like for a while. And then I begin to see that the problem is I'm still locked into the narrative. I'm still operating in life through what we might call the ego, the condition of self that our book says we need to be free of, and gives us directions on how to do that. And a lot of times I gave validity to the condition of self, which kept it alive. And we don't need to do that. Uh, if it weren't possible to be free from it, why would we even ask in the third step? You know what I mean? Do I really mean that prayer? It says I might want to think, well, or am I just checking boxes with it? Um, so I just want to share with you guys how I hooked up with a guy. I was a couple years sober, 2.5, 3 years sober, and a guy spoke at a local conference, Don Pritz from Aurora, Colorado, changed my life. I got in that guy's back pocket for a little over a decade, and thank God for that, man. Changed my life. He's the one that read this book to me over the phone from Aurora, Colorado, and just changed everything about it, and allowed me access to this power that is deep down within us. That's why we kind of need to get beyond the story, you know. uh, it'll block us from experiencing that which is already within us. We don't need to go anywhere here. The genesis of our belief system is already within us. It's deep down within us. And our big book leads us directly to that, to a direct experience with God. And I mean, we work steps. I get that. I understand that. But in chapter 4 here, before I really even get into step work, they're leading me into a direct experience with God that I've had most of my life. So I look back on it since I started having conscious experiences. And it happens on page 46. I'm going to read just a little bit, sorry. But So we looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. How could you not? You know what I mean? uh, we looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. I had been doing that my whole life. So the questions they bring up here really resonate. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? Yeah. And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? I couldn't. Yet, and here's where they began to really gently lead me into this direct experience with God. Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, right? But it was fleeting and soon lost. What I was encouraged to do with that is look back into my own experience and consider the moments of awe and wonder that I had had. And I, like I said, I've been having them my whole life. I remember as a little boy laying on the grass out on that farm, looking up at the stars or looking up at the clouds in the middle of the day, not questioning a bunch of stuff. I have memories as a little boy, like catching frogs and stuff in our farm pond, and I didn't have any reference to the condition of self. That wasn't there. The filter of the ego hadn't done what it did to me later on in life. And so these moments of awe and wonder, as I began to experience, look into my own experience with that, it brought me what it'll bring us to, it brought me to is an experience of the present moment, which every spiritual teacher I've ever checked out, talked to, read about, discussed with, they all talk about the same thing: the here and now, right here, right now, in this breath, in this moment, or even maybe a step before now, to a place where we watch, participate in the unfoldment of life as it happens. And that began for me with these moments of awe and wonder. And like I remember, I'll just float out a couple quick examples. The first time I stood on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, I looked out at that thing. There's just a brief time there, but time like doesn't exist in that moment. And I know you know what I'm talking about. There's a space there where the narrative isn't going. It's just like peace. It's like, wow. It's I love the description, awe and wonder. And as I began to look at those experiences in my life, what I noticed is there again, like I experienced as a little kid, there was no reference to self. I was absolutely in that moment where that's the only place we're going to experience God. We don't experience God in the thinking mind. It's impossible. We might have a bunch of ideas about it, but you will not experience God in the mind. This is a different thing we do here. Another experience I had, I was in the United States Navy and went on a couple of Western Pacific deployments. I loved being out at sea. We'd be out there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I like to go out on the fantail of the ship, on the back of the ship. And some nights, like that ocean would be like just flat, like a mirror, and you'd kind of set your eyes out to what you thought might be the horizon, and you couldn't tell where the sky ended or started or where the ocean did, and the like the stars were reflected in the water. And I had those same experiences. I wasn't even looking for it. I mean, I was in full blown active alcoholism with both of those experiences, yet God came through that. And um, I'll be forever grateful for that. that's where I'm gonna have this experience with this power. It's not in the intellect. In this chapter, what it does is it keeps trying to draw us out of the intellect into our own experience. The great realities deep within. It's already there, right? Um, and then on page 47, this was one of the most powerful spiritual experiences I had with all of the work in the big book that I've ever done. It was like I was given permission, like to really question the file system in my mind that I had around God, spiritual stuff. Like I was given permission to do that in a way. And it's right at the beginning of 47 where it says, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. We talk a lot about that, Nabe. I wonder how many of us really have it. It's easy to talk about and around that, but what about a real experience? It says that this applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. And here's the exercise I was given. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Fritz turned that into an exercise for me. And I just want to share with you guys. I mean, I love religions. It's all beautiful to me. I'm not, if I sound like I might be cutting one down, I'm not. But I was brought up in the Catholic Church as a little boy, a little bitty church out in the middle of a cornfield in eastern Iowa. My great granddad built the church when he farmsteaded over here from Germany. They were devout Catholics. And so when I was growing up as a little boy, that's where we went Wednesday nights, Sundays. And so the reference, the file system that I had about God, the terms were things associated with that, like God, Jesus, cross, church, Virgin Mary, heaven, hell, devil, Easter, Christmas, love, marriage, blah, blah, on and on and on. And I wrote out, Don had me just write out all those spiritual terms, anything that came to my mind that had to do with God or spiritual stuff. And then I'm to ask myself, I'm to do exactly what it says, to not let any prejudice that I have deter me from honestly asking myself what those terms mean to me. Because we have a reference system, it's part of the operating system. It's kind of a shame we do this with people too. We can have a negative experience with somebody that goes in the file system. Then the next time we see that person, that's the reference point. My reference point with God was all, I thought it was all a bunch of malarkey, but I was afraid to question it. And when I started writing, I got off the phone with Don and I started writing what that stuff really meant to me. It wasn't about what I knew about that stuff. It wasn't about what the Bible said about it. It wasn't what the preacher man said about it. It wasn't what I'd been taught about it. I could have wrote volumes of what I knew about those words. See, that's the problem. Is the thinking we know, that thinking I know about it. It's not like that. I'm to ask myself, what does that really mean to me today? I got about 5 minutes into that little exercise and I called Don back. I said, hey man, what you're asking me to do here seems kind of blasphemous. That gives you an idea of how locked up I was in some of that stuff. And he kind of giggled at that a little bit. He said, listen, Mike, if anything you know about spiritual things is true, it will still be here when we're done with this work. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I almost felt a relief with that. And I knew he was telling the truth. He said, trust me, and I trusted the guy. So I just wrote what those words meant to me. And when I have guys do this, I don't ask them to share that with me. That's personal to them. And but what most of those words on that page on that day when I did that exercise on that day in that moment, most of those words didn't mean anything to me. And that's what I wrote down. That really doesn't mean anything. How important is that? Well, it says at the start this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. So it was better for me to start out on this spiritual journey with a God that didn't mean anything to me rather than a head full of old ideas about God that hadn't done anything for me. It was an unbelievable experience for me, just absolutely unbelievable. It got me out of the narrative, out of the thinking I need to know mind into my heart a little bit. And, um, that this, like the book says, the consciousness of our belief is sure to come to us, which means it's already there. The consciousness of the belief will come to us. And I don't pretend to know what God is, but I have a direct experience with that power today. Um, that thing about the moments of awe and wonder, um, Bill even talked about that. We want to look for experiences that transcend our reasoning. Bill, in his story, remember how he talks about being in the Winchester Cathedral, and he says, much moved, I wondered outside. I understand that feeling that he's talking about. Much moved. It wasn't like from up here. It was an experience of spirit. Um, and that's what we're looking for here, right? That's what the spiritual people point at. That's what this book is about, to bring me into a relationship with that power. Um, what time is it? Oh, you're timing me. Okay. So I'm just kind of looking here at some stuff. I love the bedevilment exercise. Um, it again, I think it's a great exercise for the second part of the first step. And after that, it talks about when we saw others solve their problems, not problem whiskey, but problems, those bedevilments. I need to have a like a changed mind around that stuff. So I see other people solve their problems by that simple reliance on the spirit of the universe. I have to stop doubting the power of God. My ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Which really, if you think about that, that means my idea of God won't work because it's my idea. So they're again pulling me out of the mind, right? Because the ego wants to become spiritualized here and look good or something. And if that's happening, I can tell you that there will be no real freedom in your heart, in your life. There just won't. There will be repetitive runs through the work. There'll be some idea that service might keep you sober. There'll be all this chasing externally reading stuff and seeking different, and it's all good. I mean, it's it's like it's like the path of negation. We got to do all that stuff to come home, you know. Um, so when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? And sounds like a bunch of you guys are probably pretty active in sponsorship here. I feel like I might be preaching the choir with some of the stuff, but um, when we work with people and we bring them to this, presented as a question, it's just like, the answer usually is, well, yeah, I believe that God is, and which is okay. But if I'm going to say that God is, then God is everything. And if I'm going to say that God isn't, then God is nothing. And once in a while, you'll get a guy that's honest, and they'll say, "Well, I believe God is, but I don't believe God's everything." And so that's challenged me to question that stuff for myself a little bit. It's a for me, it was something I needed to consider, um, because they would say, like, I believe God is, but God's not everything, because what about the children that are dying of cancer surrounded by their families today, right now? You know, what about children that are starving? What about all the calamities and stuff? I mean, how do you line that up with this loving God that we talk about? And I don't know. I don't have a question to that or an answer to that stuff. But what it brought me to experience of is, it says in here, when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is the most important fact of their lives, right? They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. And it brought me to a realization for me, when I go through that and look at that I think it's both of those for me. God is everything and God is nothing. And all that it has to do with is, if I'm not consciously aware of the presence of God right here, right now, in this moment, God is nothing. If I'm consciously aware of the presence of God, God is everything. And look into your own experience with that. Right? When I think about the children that are dying or whatever, um, if I'm in the consciousness of the presence of God, I respond from a place of, like, love and compassion. I wish there was something I could do to help. If I'm not consciously aware of the presence of God, the response to something like that can be very different. It can even kind of be dark. So I think that's like what we're trying to get on board with here when we talk about this relationship with God. It's a relationship based on experience, and we've all had the experiences of it. Yet we spend all of our time out here, and I always encourage people to look where this book encourages us to look, and that's deep down within. On page 54, they go back to those moments of awe and wonder, I think, in a little bit deeper, when they say, who of us had not loved something or somebody? how much did that feeling have to do um, with reason? It says little or nothing, we saw at last. Like, I have 4 boys. I mean, I love my boys. It's been uh, a I never thought that that would be possible for me with the life I used to live. I thought I was going to be just never be a dad. I just thought I would never have that experience, but I did. And um, most of my most beautiful memories of my life have been raising those boys. I don't have to think in my mind about the experience of love that I feel for them. And you don't have to do that with your own kids or the feeling you have for a friend, an old friend. It wells up naturally within us. When them little guys were little, and I'd come to the door and they'd run up and grab my legs. I didn't have to think about or make up some idea of loving them. It was as a part of me as anything, more natural than my next breath, I would say. It was a part of my makeup. So this whole AA experience with seeking God led me right back within. Um, One of the old boys that walked the planet a couple of thousand years ago talked to his followers about being more like children, you know. And I what AA has done, what this experience with God has done for me, is really kind of brought me back to where I was as a little boy, about 5 years old. I mean, life today is like I love a mystery, and it's just mysterious to me. And I believe our program, when it says the most satisfactory years lie ahead, um, I just have that. It's kind of like I don't come at life with any expectancy on how I think it should be. I've done that. I think it's natural, but there's a place beyond that here, or prior to that, if we have the experience of it. And I didn't know any of that, or have the experience of that until AA woke me up. Um, so on 55, and I'm gonna probably pass after this a little bit. It says that we were fooling ourselves, for deep down every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. So again, it's already there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. So all of this work with the second step, I thought it was about um, coming to believe. I looked at it like coming to believe in something as something to do, but it isn't that. It's the experience of something happening to us, right? It's like I didn't surrender, I got surrendered. I didn't make this experience with God show up. It was just my eyes got pointed in the right direction. Something happened, something woke up, and I'll be forever indebted to Alcoholics Anonymous. I spend my life is about this work, and helping people to have their own relationship with God. That's what this whole thing is about. And I appreciate you guys having me in for a little bit to share a little bit of my experiences with it. I love you.